Who wins Florida? The leading nations of Europe all competed to claim lands and wealth in the New World. These nations were rivals in the founding of colonies, too. In the land we now call Florida, two great powers battled for control. How did this conflict affect American settlement? On an April day in 1564, three ships slipped away from the docks of a French harbor. They were bound for the wide Atlantic and the coast of Florida. Aboard the ships were 300 men and 4 women with different backgrounds. Some of these people were wealthy, some were workers, and some were soldiers. However, most of the travelers were Protestants. They may have been hoping to escape the religious violence in France at this time. Their leader was René Goulaine de Laudonnière, whose mission was to establish a colony in the New World. He too may have hoped to escape religious violence, but the French rulers who sent him wanted something else. These rulers knew that great quantities of silver and gold filled the Spanish galleons, or ships, that sailed from the New World. Such treasures came from Spanish conquests in the Caribbean, Mexico, and beyond. Other European nations feared and envied Spain. Their rulers wanted a share of this wealth and power. Spain had also suffered some failures. It had tried unsuccessfully to claim land in Florida and north of the Rio Grande. These failures offered opportunities for Spain's rivals, such as France, which now hoped to succeed where Spain had not. The French ships reached Florida in June 1564. Laudonnière made sure to choose a site that they could easily defend, and he quickly put his people to work building their new settlement. There they built a fort, which they called Fort Caroline, and unloaded their supplies, which included guns, gunpowder, and many other weapons. The new settlers needed to protect themselves because they knew that the Spanish would try to remove them from Florida. After all, the French meant to challenge Spanish control of the region. Fort Caroline was in a good position to attack Spanish treasure ships sailing for Europe. Laudonnière also had to worry about his own people. Many of the settlers refused to do the difficult work necessary to build a settlement. As they hunted for gold, supplies dwindled. American Indians living nearby at first willingly gave food to the settlers. Soon, though, the American Indians grew tired of feeding the hungry French. By the summer of 1565, the colony was in trouble. The settlers challenged Laudonnière's leadership. One group stole 2 ships and sailed off to make their fortunes as pirates, while other settlers decided to abandon Fort Caroline. Before they could leave, however, supply ships arrived from France. Several hundred new settlers joined the struggling colony. The colony also obtained a new leader, named Jean Ribault. It seemed as if the colony that had nearly collapsed had now been given another opportunity. A turning point for Spain and France. But in fact, Fort Caroline was in great danger. Long before Ribault's arrival, a few men who had deserted the colony had notified the Spanish of the new French settlement. As the French had predicted, Spain did not plan to allow the colony to survive and flourish. Spain's King Philip II ordered the removal of the French opposition in Florida. He put Pedro Menendez de Aviles, one of his best soldiers, in charge of the mission. Menendez sailed from Spain in the summer of 1565. His ships reached the coast of Florida at about the same time that Ribault's ships arrived. Menendez wasted little time in seeking out Fort Caroline. Finding Ribault's ships there, Menendez attacked and scattered the French settlers. He then wanted to attack the fort, but his large ships could not keep up with the smaller French ships. So Menendez left to find a place on land for his forces to gather and organize an attack on Fort Caroline. Menendez chose a site a few dozen miles from Fort Caroline, which he called St. Augustine. On September 8, 1565, he led his troops ashore and began to build a new settlement. Meanwhile, Ribault's scattered ships had returned to Fort Caroline, and the French decided to launch their own attack. The plan ended in disaster. Before they could strike at St. Augustine, a sudden and powerful storm arrived and destroyed the French warships. Fortunately for the Spanish, St. Augustine had been spared. Now it was Menendez's turn to attack again. He led his forces on a march over land and through swamps to reach Fort Caroline. The difficult journey lasted for days, but their hard work paid off. They surprised the French and were able to overwhelm the fort's weakened defenses. In a bloody rampage, the Spanish forces massacred many of the French settlers. The year 1565 was a turning point for Spain and France in the Americas. In that year, Spain had its first successes in establishing a settlement in Florida. The base that Pedro Menendez de Aviles built at St. Augustine has survived, prospered, and grown over the years. Today, the town of St. Augustine is celebrated as the first permanent European settlement in the United States. In 1565, France's plan for establishing a colony in the New World ended, at least temporarily. The French did send a force to the area in 1567, but only for revenge. French soldiers killed some Spaniards at Fort Caroline, but then they left abruptly after the attack. France did not give up its New World dreams. The French would later build an empire in North America as fur traders. These frontier businesses did not require large settlements of colonists, and as a result, the French population in North America was never very substantial. Spain had other jealous rivals in Europe. These countries would seek their own share of Spain's American treasure. They would send pirates to raid Spanish ships and settlers to start new colonies. Spain had won a victory in 1565, but the larger struggle for control of the New World continued.